The restaurant stood high above the city, perched on the 42nd floor like a polished crown. Floor-to-ceiling windows curved along the walls, revealing a glittering skyline where headlights flowed like veins of light and skyscrapers blinked patiently in the dark. Inside, everything was muted elegance, soft amber lighting, tables dressed in white linen, chairs upholstered in deep charcoal leather. The air carried a blend of expensive cologne, warm bread, and something floral that lingered without ever announcing itself. Adrian Vale sat perfectly straight in his chair, as he did in boardrooms and private jets, his posture disciplined by years of control. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like it had been poured on, every seam precise, every cuff aligned. A platinum watch peeked from beneath his sleeve, understated but unmistakably valuable. Across from him sat his son, Leo, small in comparison, his legs dangling above the carpet as he leaned forward, elbows hovering just above the tablecloth, afraid to touch anything. Leo's eyes moved constantly. He took in the silverware laid out like instruments, the way the wine glasses caught and fractured the light, the silent efficiency of the staff gliding between tables. This world was familiar to Adrian, but to Leo it felt like stepping into a movie where everyone knew their lines except him. "Dad," Leo whispered, his voice barely audible over the gentle jazz drifting from hidden speakers, "are we supposed to talk this quietly?" Adrian followed his son's gaze to a nearby table where a couple spoke in hushed tones, their laughter soft and contained. He allowed himself a small smile. "You can talk normally. Just, politely." Leo nodded seriously, as if this were an important rule he needed to memorize. "Okay." A waiter appeared almost instantly, placing menus in front of them with a nod. Leo stared at his menu as though it were written in another language. He leaned closer to Adrian. "Why are there no pictures?" Adrian chuckled under his breath. "You'll get used to it." He hadn't planned this dinner weeks in advance the way he did everything else. The idea had come suddenly, impulsively, on a rare evening when meetings ended early and the house felt too quiet. Leo had been spending more time staring out windows lately, carrying a sadness that mirrored Adrian's own. Dinner, Adrian had thought, might help, something different, something memorable. As they waited, Adrian watched his son more than he watched the room. Leo's hair stuck up slightly at the back, just like his mother's used to in the mornings. That familiar ache settled in Adrian's chest, but he pushed it aside. Tonight was about Leo. A young waitress approached their table, her steps careful, almost hesitant. She couldn't have been much older than 22 or 23. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, a few loose strands framing a face that was trying hard to remain calm. A black apron was tied around her waist, and she carried a tray with 2 drinks balanced carefully on top. "Good evening," she said, her voice polite but tight, as though she'd practiced the tone. "Welcome. My name is Maya. Can I start you off with?" She glanced at Adrian, recognition flickering in her eyes for just a fraction of a second. It was gone almost immediately, but Adrian noticed. People always noticed. Sometimes it came with admiration, sometimes resentment, sometimes fear. He pretended not to see it. "We'll take sparkling water," Adrian said evenly. "And an apple juice." Maya nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Of course." She shifted the tray slightly, adjusting her grip. Leo watched her with open curiosity, his head tilted. At that moment, one of the restaurant's patrons stood up from a nearby table, pushing his chair back farther than necessary. The leg scraped against the floor, catching the edge of the carpet that ran beneath Maya's feet. Her shoe snagged. The tray tilted. For a heartbeat, everything seemed suspended. The glass of sparkling water slid just enough for its base to lose balance. Maya's eyes widened as she tried to correct it, her hand moving too quickly, too desperately. No. The glass tipped fully, the liquid leaping free in a clear, shimmering arc. It came down squarely against Adrian's chest, soaking into his suit, splashing across his lap, droplets scattering onto the pristine tablecloth. The sound, liquid against fabric, glass clinking, felt impossibly loud. The restaurant went silent. Maya froze, breath caught in her throat. Her face drained of color so fast it was as if someone had flipped a switch. I'm so sorry," she stammered, words tumbling over each other. "I didn't see the carpet. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get napkins, I'll call the manager, I swear." Around them, conversations halted. Heads turned. Some diners leaned back in their chairs to get a better look. Others whispered behind raised hands. A man at the bar raised his eyebrows. Someone quietly took out a phone, then hesitated. Leo stared at his father's chest, at the dark stain spreading across the expensive fabric. His stomach twisted. He had seen his father angry before, not often, but enough to know how sharp it could be. He looked up slowly, nervously, searching Adrian's face. Adrian didn't move. He looked down at his suit, then back at Maya. His expression was unreadable, carefully neutral, the same one he wore during tense negotiations when entire companies waited on his reaction. Maya's hands shook as she tried to dab at the spill with her napkin, then stopped, realizing she was probably making it worse. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She knew exactly who he was now. Adrian Vale, the man whose name was attached to buildings and headlines. The kind of man people warned you about during training. I'm really sorry, she whispered again, voice cracking. Please, I'll fix it. The manager began to move from across the room, his face already tight with panic. Other waitstaff hovered uncertainly at the edges, unsure whether to intervene or stay away. Leo swallowed hard. His fingers curled into the edge of his seat. Adrian finally inhaled, slow and deliberate, as if grounding himself. The silence stretched another second longer than comfortable. In that moment, everyone seemed to be waiting for a single thing, how a powerful man would respond when something went wrong. Adrian pushed his chair back. The soft scrape against the floor sounded thunderous in the stillness. Maya flinched. Leo's heart pounded. Adrian stood up. Adrian rose to his full height, the chair sliding back just enough to brush against the leg of the table. For a brief, terrible second, Maya was certain this was the moment everything fell apart. Her job, her rent, maybe even her chance to finish school. She braced herself, shoulders tight, eyes fixed somewhere just below his chin because she couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. Adrian looked around the table first. The spill glistened under the warm lights, sparkling water dripping slowly from the edge of the linen onto the carpet below. His suit clung uncomfortably to his chest, cool and heavy. The sensation should have irritated him. He had worn this suit to meetings with heads of state, to sign deals worth more than the building they were standing in. Once, the smallest crease in fabric would have bothered him more than most people's problems. But tonight, something else anchored him. He glanced at Leo. His son's eyes were wide, anxious, fixed on Adrian's face as if trying to read the future. Written there, Adrian saw more than fear in those eyes. He saw expectation. Children learned not from lectures, but from moments like this, moments when the world paused and waited for an example. Adrian exhaled, slow and steady. He reached up and unbuttoned his jacket. The sound of the button popping free cut through the tension like a whisper. He slid the jacket off his shoulders with deliberate care and draped it over the back of his chair, the wet fabric dark and wrinkled. A few diners exchanged puzzled glances. This was not what they had expected. Maya blinked, confused. Adrian looked at her then, really looked at her. Her hands were clenched at her sides, knuckles white. Her eyes shimmered, fighting tears she clearly refused to let fall. She looked young, exhausted, like someone who had learned to apologize before she learned to breathe. Are you hurt? Adrian asked. The words landed so gently that Maya thought she'd misheard him. What? She said softly. Did you fall? He clarified, his voice calm, almost kind. Are you okay? Maya shook her head quickly. No, I'm fine. I mean, yes, I'm fine. Just clumsy. I'm so sorry about your suit, sir. Adrian nodded once, accepting the answer. Then he turned to Leo, placing a hand on the back of his chair. Leo, he said quietly, what do we do when someone makes a mistake? Leo hesitated. His gaze flicked from his father to Maya and back again. His voice came out small but steady. We helped them fix it. A murmur rippled through the surrounding tables. Someone smiled. Someone else looked down, suddenly thoughtful. Adrian's lips curved into a genuine smile, one that softened the sharp lines of his face. That's right. He turned back to Maya. It's just a suit, he said, as though he were talking about a napkin. They make more of them every day. Accidents happen. Maya's breath hitched. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over despite her efforts. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. She wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand, embarrassed by the display but unable to stop. I can get you another drink. Or, cleaning, or. That won't be necessary, Adrian said gently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, removing a few bills without looking at them. He placed them on the table, tucking them partly under his plate so they wouldn't slide. For the trouble, he said. Maya's eyes widened. Sir, that's too much. I can't. You can, Adrian replied, not unkindly. And you will. She nodded, overwhelmed, clutching the edge of her apron as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. By now, the manager had arrived, breathless and flushed. Mr. Vale, he began, his voice thick with apology, I am so terribly sorry. This is completely unacceptable. We will, of course, comp the meal, and I assure you this matter will be dealt with immediately. Adrian raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. There's nothing to deal with, he said evenly. Your waitress tripped. No one was hurt. The manager glanced at Maya, then back at Adrian. Sir, we have policies. Then change them, Adrian said quietly. The manager swallowed. Of course. Adrian gestured toward Maya. She looks like she could use a glass of water. Please make sure she gets one before anything else. Maya stared at him, stunned. The manager nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. As Maya turned to leave, still shaking but visibly lighter, Leo watched her go. He felt something warm bloom in his chest, a strange mix of pride and relief. He looked at his father as Adrian sat back down, rolling his sleeves slightly to avoid the damp cuffs. Dad, Leo asked softly. Yes, champ. Mom would have liked that, right? The question caught Adrian off guard. His throat tightened, the answer lodged somewhere deeper than words. He looked down at his son, at the earnest hope in his eyes, and nodded. She would have loved it, he said. She always said kindness was the one thing you never run out of. Leo smiled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Around them, the restaurant slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed, quieter now, more thoughtful. A couple at the next table exchanged glances. Somewhere behind them, someone murmured, "That's class." Their food arrived not long after, beautifully plated. Adrian ate in his shirt sleeves, unbothered by the damp chill lingering on his skin. Leo chattered about school, about a science project and a stray dog he'd seen that afternoon, his laughter bubbling freely. From the kitchen doorway, Maya watched them for a moment before returning to work. Her hands still trembled, but her heart felt steadier than it had in weeks. She would remember this night, not because she'd spilled a drink on a billionaire, but because of what happened after. And as Adrian listened to his son speak, he realized something unexpected. The suit could be replaced, the dinner forgotten. But the lesson Leo had witnessed tonight would stay with him far longer than any fortune Adrian could ever leave behind.